Okay, so you want a peaceful birth where your body and your baby can lead the process. Yes, mama. So what are the steps that you can take that are most supportive in creating that kind of experience? The first thing that I want to say is that there are so many different ways that birth can unfold, right? And I truly believe that even when birth happens in a way that wasn't in alignment with our specific vision, it really does still have so many gems for us. I feel like every baby, the way that they come into the world is perfect in the way that it reflects to the mother whatever they need to know and learn as they step into motherhood. That's a deep belief of mine. And so there's a difference between creating a vision for your birth and getting really fixated on that specific way of birth unfolding, and being very intentional and deliberate in the way that you create your container for your birth, and then choosing to step into surrender and allow the birth experience to unfold and to trust. We can exercise control up to a certain point, and then once we reach that point, we have to release control. But I feel that it is much easier to embrace the transition into that place of total surrender and lack of control if we have already been very deliberate in creating the container that supports us in having the safety that we need to feel to be able to choose to go into that experience of surrender. Planning a hospital birth does mean that you're going to have more choices to make because there are more options available in the hospital. And so one of the most important things that you can do as you prepare to have a hospital birth, especially if you're intending to create a peaceful hospital birth, is to learn how to make choices from love rather than fear. We all have experienced negative messaging about childbirth in the movies and media. And the obstetric model, which is the primary model of care for maternity care in the US, tends to operate from more of a strict and fear-based philosophy. Now, every provider is different, but it is true that liability and capitalism has impacted policies and many of the ways that care providers are allowed to operate. So there's a couple different tools that I would like to teach you that can be really helpful, but first I want to tell you this. This is a fear that many people and women have as they step into their birth experience, especially in a more medicalized setting, if they're really wanting to exercise self-agency and have a sovereign experience. They have a fear that they'll give up their power of leading the experience and give up their seat of sovereignty where they're in the driver's seat, and it'll suddenly feel like someone else is in the driver's seat and things are happening to them rather than them making informed choices and being an active part of the decision-making process and an active participant in their birth. And I want to acknowledge that it is normalized and also glorified in our culture at large to have the woman giving birth be like a damsel in distress, to be completely incapable of making their own choices, and for other people to make choices for them. And some providers and policymakers believe this so firmly that they will manipulate and coerce people into making the decision that the provider wants them to make, because that provider truly does not believe that the woman has the capability of making her own choices for her own body. And that's a bunch of bullshit. So then the question is, how can we find the way to exercise our self-agency and to stay aligned with our sovereignty and our birth intention throughout the birth experience, even if birth happens or unfolds in a way that wasn't really in alignment with our intention or our vision, and while birthing in a model of care that is happy to make choices for you rather than you making them yourself. Many women fear that they're going to give their power away. So this is what I want to ask you. What does it look like to give your power away? And I invite you to really reflect on that for a moment. What does that look like? What does that feel like? And then I invite you to ask, why would I do that? Why would I choose to give my power away? Because the truth is, no one is going to force you to give them agency over your birth. Hospital staff may try, and that is why it's so important to find care providers who you really align with, who you feel and believe respect you and respect your autonomy. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you are the one in that moment who makes that choice. So I'm asking you, why would you make that choice? And then to take it even deeper, I invite you to consider this. You can't give your power away. You giving your power away is actually an illusion of your own creation, because your power is something that you cannot give away because you are inherently powerful. And it is never that you gave your power away. It is that you chose to forget that you have all the power you need within you to birth your baby. And that's okay. I choose to forget that all the time. And then I choose to remember again. So I think there are a few different pieces to this. There are the logistical pieces and the emotional pieces. And so logistically, just to give you a little bit of information on this, really learning and understanding both you and your partner, this is very important that both of you really fully know and understand the risks and benefits of all the options available to you and what the current evidence has to say on all of your options. This is information you can find in my online course under Module 3, which is Understanding Informed Care. Because when you fully understand all of your options available to you, you're able to make informed decisions. And unfortunately, a lot of the research we have today on birth is not implemented into policy for many, many years. I read a study that it takes 17 years for current evidence to make its way into policy. So I could list many examples of policies in place that actually had to do with circumstances that no longer apply to us today. Because 50, 60, 70 years ago, things were a lot different. And so that 24-hour rule, for example, if your water breaks, you have 24 hours before they want the baby to be born. And if your water breaks before you go into labor, then they want you to come straight into the hospital and start Pitocin right away. And this is because they're worried about the risk for infection. But the truth is, with the research that we have today, most people who meet certain standards are able to safely go 48 to 72 hours without increasing the risk of infection to the baby before the baby comes. And then, of course, doing your research beforehand on your birthing facility and your provider of choice and learning what their rates of interventions are, learning what their outcomes look like, how many C-sections that provider does every year, things like that. That's really important to know. And to make sure every time you leave your appointment with your care provider, you feel respected, seen, you feel supported, and you feel safe. And I highly recommend you hire a doula for a hospital birth, especially because in a hospital birth, there are more decisions to be made. People will offer you many different things, and having someone who can support with the communication can be really helpful. And having a doula at your hospital birth is an evidence-based way to significantly reduce your risk for interventions. Okay, now I want to talk about the emotional piece. So there are two different tools that I would like to offer to you, and the first one is called Knowledge, Wisdom, and Love. And you can find this in Module 2 of the Peaceful Birth course. So we learn evidence-based information on all the risks and benefits of the options available to you. Next, we're checking in with our intuition, because ultimately your intuition is the most important guide throughout this whole process. And you learning to trust your intuition now throughout pregnancy and birth will support you in being able to tune into your intuition and listen to it in parenthood. And that makes parenthood so much easier when you have a trusting relationship with yourself. Intuition can be felt through sensations in your body or through your emotional state. So if you're offered an invitation maybe to induce labor, for example, you can use your body as a compass and feel what that invitation feels like for you. Inducing your labor. How do you feel in the presence of that choice? And if you feel tightness in your throat, in your chest, if you feel your body kind of arching away, if you feel your gut saying like no, that is likely your intuition telling you no. But if you feel your heart opening, if you feel a softening, a relaxation, and expanding in the presence of a choice, oftentimes that is your intuition telling you yes. But the most important piece is that we're choosing from love. So if you are wanting to experience a peaceful hospital birth, if every single choice that you make for your birth experience, including your provider, the location of your birth, the people who are going to be there, the birth prep that you're doing, the options that you decline or accept, if every single choice comes from a place of love, that is going to significantly support the container for your birth aligning with the feeling of love. And this is the way to protect yourself from making choices from fear. Because every time you have an option to make a choice, you first check in with your body and you feel love for your baby. Feel the love for your baby and imagine your baby in your arms having had the most beautiful birth experience imaginable. And you did it and your baby is here and you have that feeling. Okay. So does this choice align with that feeling? Does it match? And if it's like, no, we're going to steer clear of that choice. I had a friend who had a suspected big baby. They did ultrasounds at the end of her pregnancy, which are not medically indicated most of the time, the growth ultrasound at the end of pregnancy. And they said that her baby was measuring big. And when babies are measuring big, what that really means is that there's a 50% chance they're big, but there's also a 50% chance they're not big, because identifying fetal weight in the third trimester is highly unreliable. That's why ACOG does not recommend induction for suspected big babies, because half the time you'll be inducing people who have small or average sized babies. So my friend's husband wanted a very highly medicalized birth, and she wanted a normal physiologic birth. Her provider even said, I will let you attempt to have a vaginal birth, but we should consider talking about cesarean. So her provider was considering a cesarean simply because her baby was measuring big on ultrasound. The nerve. That's a rabbit hole for another day. The thing is, my friend was so afraid of having a cesarean, and she was so committed to her fear. She was unwilling to let that go, unwilling to work with it, unwilling to come out of her mind into her heart and into her intuition. And so with her provider offering her this way, this induction that is going to save her from a cesarean, right? If she has an induction before the baby gets too big, it will decrease the risk of her needing to have a cesarean, or whatever the story was. She chose to compromise everything that she wanted for her birth, everything that her intuition was telling her, just because she was so afraid of having a cesarean. And this person told her that she could help her prevent having a cesarean if she did what she said. And then she gets an induction. She gets every intervention under the sun. They break her water. The water is broken for 24 hours and the baby doesn't come. So then they do a cesarean. It's very likely that she could have had that normal physiologic birth that she was wanting had she truly honored the inner guidance of her heart and made decisions in alignment with what she wanted to create for her birth, and chose from love rather than fear. We are so used to outsourcing our wisdom, outsourcing guidance and power, looking outside of ourselves for something to help us be enough, looking outside of ourselves to be loved. The truth is that you don't need anything outside of yourself to give birth. You don't need anything outside of yourself to be enough. And when you are willing to truly embrace and accept the reality that you are perfect, that you are whole, and that you don't need anything outside of yourself to give birth, everything will change. Because when you trust yourself and know that you will not be outsourcing your power, outsourcing anything outside of yourself anymore, that you are done with that and you're ready to believe and accept that you have everything you need within you always, you are going to walk into your birth experience feeling like the badass queen mother that you are. So how do you do that? Practice connecting to your intuition every day. Practice using your body as a compass whenever you have a decision to be made around your birth, and feel that decision. And then I invite you to imagine your dream birth and really feel the experience that you're wanting to have. Feel it in your body and use that intention, use that feeling in your body as your guide point, as your check-in point. And throughout your day, use your attention whenever you find yourself kind of feeling stressed or worried to step back into the reality that you have everything you need within you to give birth, and that you are perfect, and that you are creating the perfect birth for your family. However that looks. And even if things unfold in ways that you didn't really anticipate, or that doesn't align with your preferences, like the need for a medical intervention were to arise, first you know if that medical intervention is actually necessary or not, because you did your research and you know what the options are. And you know what the evidence has to say. Then you can learn language for advocacy to have conversations with your providers throughout your experience to make sure that you're the one sitting in the driver's seat. And then you can learn language and ways to communicate with your care provider. And you can also find this in Module 3 of my course, and to be an active participant in your birth. And I really can't stress this enough. Having conversations with your care provider beforehand about this topic is so important. And you can be honest with them. You can be vulnerable, and you can say, I'm afraid that I'll experience things happening to me. And it is so important to me that I am actively making decisions throughout my birth experience. And even if something ends up unfolding in a way that I wasn't expecting, I'm still informed and I still feel that the choice is mine, and see what they have to say about that. And for more emotional preparation support, please come to our live Q&A calls in the group. I would love to be able to offer you more one-on-one support. You can also look at Module 1 of the Peaceful Birth Method course too. This is your body and your baby and your birth, and you got this.